back again. We're on our 4th video series, and this time we're going to learn how to take these plants and make more plants, especially the plants that we absolutely love. So we brought along a Richmond Garden Club member, longtime Richmond Garden Club member, former president of the Garden Club, volunteer with Master Gardeners, and an expert in propagating and dividing. He's going to show us how to get more plants of what we love. Thank you, Gary Lake.
You're welcome. Hi, so yes, I'm Gary Lake. I'm going to be talking about how to divide plants in your garden. The type of plants that we're going to be dealing with today are called perennial plants, and there's 2 major categories. There are woody perennials. These are shrub type plants that you will see greenery on or colored leaves during the growing season, but they will often, not all of them, but they will often lose their leaves over the winter and green up again the following year. The second group is a group of perennials called herbaceous perennials. These tend to be very smaller perennials that will die back over the winter and come back to life in the springtime. So I'm going to show you how to deal with both of these groups as we go forward. The first thing I want to talk just briefly about is the tools that you will need for dividing your perennials. The most important one is probably going to be your shovel. And the shovel, if you've stored it over the winter, it is a good idea to make sure it's nice and clean, possibly with a slight bleach disinfectant over the winter time, so that you don't have any germs or viruses that you're going to contaminate your plants with. Secondly, make sure your shovel is nice and sharp, because a sharp shovel will make your job a whole lot easier. As well, there are some other tools that I often use in the process. One of them is a little saw. It's a pruning saw, but I have an old one, so I'm not worried about getting into the soil with the saw and dulling it. Because it's old, it's good for dividing up your plants. I'm going to talk and show you a little bit more how to use this later on in the segment. And finally, another thing that will come in handy is some secateurs. These are little clippers that we'll use sometimes to cut some of the plants away from the mother plant. Okay, I had just talked about the types of perennials. Now I want to spend a few minutes saying, why do we want to divide them? The obvious reason is to take plants that we love in our garden and put them in other places. So by doing your own dividing, you're going to save yourself a lot of money. You don't have to go to the garden shop and buy a plant. You can divide it. In fact, occasionally, if I got a new plant, if I buy it in a big enough pot, I will actually take it right from the garden shop and divide it. So that way, rather than buying 3, I can buy 1 and get 2 or 3 out of it. So, you know, it's a way of saving money. Another reason is the health of your plant. Some herbaceous perennials will start to die off after multiple years, especially in the center part. Some of the grasses you see and others will start to get almost like a bald spot in the center. So by digging it up and dividing it, you can rejuvenate that plant so that it comes back to full health, and you've got several others of it, either for yourself or give away for friends or whatever. So that's kind of the main reasons we divide our plants. So I'm now going to start with a demonstration of how to divide this beautiful hosta. Hostas are a very important part of most gardens here in the Lower Mainland. The reason I love them, they're very easy to propagate. They're very easy to maintain. You know, outside of scorching direct sun all summer long, they will do well in most of our gardens. Another reason that I love them is they come in such a variety. There are small ones, there are big ones, there are green and yellow and bluish green ones. You can get all sorts of variegation. You can get different leaf patterns and sizes. So it's a way of providing a lot of different colors and textures in your garden at a fairly inexpensive way. So this beautiful variegated hosta is quite mature. And in fact, it's pretty well leafed out here in the second week of May. Normally, I would probably try to do this in April, just as the leaves are starting to come out of the ground, because you can see what you're doing. It's going to be easier to divide it. To divide it now, still perfectly all right. Yesterday, there's a number of us here in the garden. We were dividing hostas all over the place. The soil is moist. There's lots of sunshine. They will take to the ground and look really well in a matter of days. So in order to divide this very robust one, I had to kind of divide the leaves a little bit to find out where. I'm not going to take the whole plant out. I'm just going to divide a portion of it. So what you're going to do is find where you wanted your dividing line, take your very sharp shovel, put it in and press down. Now with hostas, they have a very significant dense root mass. So you're going to have to put a little bit of effort into this division. So what you're going to do is push. Often it'll hit the root mass and stop. So you got to get nice and aggressive and push it right down. So you're going to work your way around by doing that. Basically cut the section you want off from the mother plant. Once I cut it off, I'll come to this side, put my shovel in, and now all the way in and lifting. It may take you a minute or two to get to this stage, depending on your soil type. Okay, so at some point you're going to have it nicely separated, and it will pull out of the ground. Okay, the next step in this process, once we've got this hosta out of the ground, is to decide how many pieces that we want to separate it into. So I've looked at it, and to me there's three kind of natural places I can cut this in order to make three new plants. So again, I'm just going to take my shovel, put it there, and just go down like that. I'm going to come over a little bit and do it a second time, just like that. So when that is done, you'll end up with a segment like this. You may find that there's a bunch of weeds and other stuff. You'll want to get those out of there before you plant it. You don't want to plant the weeds along with your nice new hosta. It's not a problem to shake out all the soil so that you basically have roots. Because the roots will love to be free when you put them in their new location so that they're able to spread out and grow relatively easily. So at this stage, I would find a location in my garden. If I was wanting to plant a hosta, I wanted it in an area that gets a bit of sun, a bit of shade, if it's got good moisture. And then you get into a bit of subjective stuff in terms of what you like. You know, look at the colors, look at the texture of this. It's nice to have variety in your garden. So you don't want a garden bed that has 12 of the same hosta, so you'll want to put it maybe someplace that is going to offer some variety. And look at the textures of other things you have in your garden, because this may go well with them. The other thing to keep in mind when you're transplanting is the height of the plant. So you don't want to stick this in your garden or place it in your garden and then have something that's 3 feet tall in front of it, because then you'll never see your beautiful hosta. So hostas tend to be fairly close to the front edge of your bed, and then you will have taller plants and shrubs behind it. So the next plant I'm going to show you how to divide is this one right here. It's called a Rudbeckia, or its common name is black-eyed Susans. These are a lovely addition to your garden. They will have beautiful yellow flowers, and the nice thing about them, they will flower all summer long. So again, a perfect plant for your garden. Again, it's another plant that will look good at the front of your garden bed. So yeah, now so let me show you how to divide this up. Again, I'm going to use my shovel, because once I get it out, and you're going to find that with the Rudbeckia, which is different than the hostas, is that it doesn't have that big solid root ball beneath it. So as I get these apart, you will actually find that if you gently pull, this mass of greenery will separate into multiple plants. So in this hand I've got 2. I've got more over here. If I keep teasing it apart, I would get another 3 or 4 plants out of that. If you want a quick start, you can plant a mass. If you want to plant them as individual, you'll find that over the period of the summer and into next year, this plant will expand so that you've got a huge mass of Rudbeckias that will, give you a lot of beautiful color for summer into fall. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to talk about is bulbs. We love to grow daffodils. All our daffodils now have died back. Right now we have some beautiful tulips that are in bloom. So these type of plants in your garden are based on a bulb under the ground. So a lot of people think as soon as the flower has disappeared that it's the time to dig their bulb up. And really what you should be doing is letting that plant, for example, this tulip has lost its flowering top, but you can see that the leaves are still green. So that means that this, because of these green leaves, it is still feeding that bulb underground. It's allowing that bulb to get bigger and prepared for next season. So only start thinking about digging up or transplanting your bulbs when this has totally died back, and that may take several months before that's going to happen. Now for demonstration purposes, I am going to, we have beside the tulips here some little daffodils, little narcissus, tete. Very popular, very easy to grow, and the nice thing about tete, they multiply very readily. So if you start to dig them up where you had 1 bulb 2 years ago, you may find you may have 5 or 6 bulbs now. So very simple process. Again, I wouldn't normally be doing this, but I just stuck my little digger into the ground. I would be doing this probably in July, pulling them up. So that little one little digger brings up 4 bulbs. So you can now expand your garden with these by putting them in different locations. So what I would probably do is in July, I would dig these up. The greenery would have died back. Then I'm going to let them dry out a bit. Because again, the ideal time to plant them, replant them, will be in the early fall. So that's a very simple process that you can do with your bulbs in the garden. Okay, the next part of today's session, I'm going to talk about a technique called layering. And what this means is that you get shrubs. This particular shrub's called the ninebark, a Physocarpus. There's other shrubs like hydrangeas, skimmias, that are very easy to propagate, create new plants by a technique called layering. So the layering process, though, takes a bit of planning. You need to start your layering process in the fall, and that's what I did. Last fall I came along and I took a low branch from this plant. I dug a little trench. I put it in the branch in the ground. I covered it over with soil, and then I put a big rock on top of it so that the soil, it didn't spring back up, the soil didn't get removed. What happens then to this branch over the year is that it will start to develop roots. And it may be hard to see, but just on this part that was buried in the ground is a series of fine roots. So this basically is ready to become a new plant. So the last step in this process, here's my ninebark again with its roots. Here's the branch. So what I'm going to do is take my secateurs, my clippers, and just snip that section off. So I'm going to come a little closer. So this is ready for planting. So again, we'll just dig a hole, probably planted that deep. Again, you will do this process in the springtime. This type of plant, it's small now, but it will possibly get 4 or 5 feet tall and 4 or 5 feet wide. So make sure your space is big enough to give it a good start in its new home. Now talk about hydrangeas. This is a very simple, similar process to what we just went through with the ninebark. Again, I had layered this branch last fall, put it in the ground, covered it. Now I come along here, and what I just did now is I first snipped off the old root. Just a slight variation. It doesn't matter whether you do that before or after. And then I'm going to pry out that plant. So there it is. See all that lovely greenery on it. I love hydrangeas. Hydrangeas, again, come in a wide variety of colors, pinks and blues and purples and whites. Some of them are even green when they start. So you can see here, well, you see possibly there's quite a root mass dangling off the bottom. Again, hydrangeas will grow. They'll probably get 3 or 4 feet tall and maybe 3 or 4 feet wide. So make sure you have a good space for them. We have here another type of hydrangea. This is a Hydrangea Annabelle. It has many, many white flowers when it starts to bloom. It's a little bit different than some of the mophead hydrangeas in that it sends up its own roots. I didn't have to layer this plant. And there are a number of plants, shrubs that will do this. They'll set up suckers or new baby plants. And again, it's very easily to take one of those baby plants and put it into another part of your garden. So in this case, all I'm going to do is either with a shovel, gently dig down, around it, you'll often find it's got some sort of larger root under the ground. Just trying to find that. Reach down with my snips, and I've taken it out, and actually 2 segments came out. One has quite a bit of root on it. The other one also has a few roots. I would probably plant this, each one separately, and create 2 new shrubs out of that. So I'll have 2 new hydrangeas from that sucker or that has come out. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about how to create a new shrub from cuttings. Now this is probably going to be just a little bit more adventurous for you, because it's going to require you to do a couple of things. You can take a stem of a plant. I've got a lovely hydrangea here, and we're going to prepare it so it can go into a pot, and hopefully will start to grow roots and all those sort of things. So one of the issues with this, the way it is, there's a little bit too much greenery on here. We want enough greenery that it can take all the energy from the sun and photosynthesis and that, but you want most of the energy going to creating new roots rather than just having feeding all these leaves. So what I would be doing is I'm going to be snipping off a number of the greenery on this, and you're not too worried about what it looks like at this point, because hydrangeas and all of these shrubs will create all sorts of new shoots. You can prune it later to create the type of shape that you want. So I'm going to get it down to just a couple of segments. Even that, I would probably go and take off parts of this right down to 4 or 5 leaves. So this now is almost ready for planting. So there is something that you can buy at your local garden shop called rooting hormones. And what it does, you would coat the bottom segment of this stem with the rooting hormone, and it again will promote the growth of roots. So they're available in all the garden shops, but be careful that you get the right one. There are several different types. There's softwood, semi-hardwood, and hardwood rooting hormones. This hydrangea, I would say, is softwood or semi. Don't get the hardwood type. Let's say you've bought the hormone now. You would follow the directions on the tin or the package. It basically means you're going to coat the bottom part of it, and then you're going to stick it in a pot of soil like that. Now preferably that's going to be potting soil. Potting soil always works best for anything that you put in a pot. It is lighter, it retains the water better. Ordinary garden soil will compact, doesn't retain the water all that well, and it won't give it off to the best start. So again, do that in potting soil, and you will find that over the time it will develop into a plant. For hydrangeas, normally the best time to do this is just going into fall, so that they can take the benefit of the warm late summer, early fall, and then you'll have a new hydrangea. You'll probably have to baby it over the winter. You're not going to stick it out, but then you've got a plant ready to go for the next spring. There's a number of other plants to do that. One of the ones that I found really easy for me when I had a full garden, I used to grow currants. And currant bushes are a sample of a plant that will sprout very easily in moist conditions. Other things like willows. Willows you can stick in the ground, any moist location. You don't have to do anything, and they will start to grow a new tree. So cuttings are another way that you can expand your garden and create new plants, gifts for your friends, plants that can go into your garden club plant sale. All sorts of reasons why we propagate plants. Hello again. As I said earlier, I was going to talk about the use of the pruning saw. It comes in very handy when you have really solid root masses that you have to go through. If you don't have a pruning saw available, you may have an old bread knife or another serrated knife that in some cases will work just as well. So you don't have to go out and buy a special tool. Often you may have something laying around. But again, for dividing, sometimes I have this clump of grass that I have dug out, and you can just take your serrated saw or knife and just cut through that, and you're ready to plant that in the ground. One thing about all the plantings that we talked about, we're lucky here at Pollock Park in the months of March, April, and well into May. The ground is really moist and retains a lot of water. But with any plantings, if you're in conditions where it's drying out or a heat spell, really remember to water well and put some mulch around your new plantings. That'll help to retain the water. Okay, so we're at the end of today's session. I've had a wonderful time here in Pollock Park. I get tremendous satisfaction out of growing things, whether it's from seeds or, in this case, dividing, layering, taking shoots, and creating new plants. It's so rewarding to kind of bring new life to a garden. And this is a very cost-effective and, for the most part, extremely simple way to expand your garden, your friends' gardens. It's just a great way to do it. So thanks for spending this time with me.
Thank you, Gary. That was awesome. And if anybody comes over to Pollock Park, they will see the value that we've had with understanding how to create more plants. So thank you very much, Gary. And then another part of our life here in Pollock Park, and I'm sure it's a big part of your life in any garden, is dealing with weeds. So our next series, our next video in this series is going to be identifying weeds and getting them out of your garden. Thank you very much for visiting us.
Thank you.